Hi all, these are some test models I painted up for my new World Eaters army. I'm going for a retro scheme and I'm using this second edition or possibly Rogue Trader era model as my reference. I made some changes for taste, notably I made the armor trim a lot more yellow. I'll be covering this paint scheme in a series as I'm brand new to all this filming stuff, so I'm just doing it bit by bit. And today we're going to start off with the red armor. So we've got our two test models. Now we need to finish up a squad, so we need 8 more guys. So these guys, I just went ahead and primed black and then airbrushed them ProAcryl Mahogany. This is going to serve as the deepest shadows for the red armor. You can, if you're just using a brush, paint the panels themselves because that's the part that's going to be red. You can also use Citadel Mornfang Brown if you don't have ProAcryl, or really just any dark reddish brown color. So this step isn't necessary, but if you have issues with lighting like I do, it helps. Basically, I took some reference pics under a light facing the upper right hand side of the miniature, so I can see the highlights and the shadows, so we kind of see, highlights coming around here, and then our deep shadows down here. Going off of my reference pics, I paint everything that isn't the darkest shadow with ProAcryl Burnt Red. Airbrushing is your friend for this step, but since I know a lot of people don't have one, I'll be painting one of these guys up with a brush so you can see the difference. This is the one I'm painting with a brush, which I hope you already knew. Please don't lick brushes. Eating paint is bad for you. So on the brush painted guy here, you can see I've covered most of the armor plates in burnt red, leaving just a little bit of the shadows in his mahogany. We'll work on the transitions in a little bit, but first I want to map out the hot spots on them. Using ProAcryl Warm Flesh for the highest highlights. This is definitely the trust the process step. It looks weird, but what we are looking for is that our highest highlights and darkest shadows make sense. Once those are good, it's all about the transitions. Next, I'm going to cover the warm flesh with ProAcryl Fluorescent Orange. You don't have to be clean with this application. In fact, I find going over a larger area helps with the blending process. You are going to want to do multiple coats, as this is the spot where we pay tribute to Duncan. But go ahead and stop when you hit about this level of saturation. So now we're going to build up the midtones. I'm using ProAcryl Bold Pyrrole Red. This is a fairly transparent color to start with, but I am going to be thinning it down with about 50% water. And I'm just making a glaze out of this. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, a little bit thinner. Something like that. First, I'm going to cover all of the hot spots and most of the burnt red with my red glaze. After that dries, I'll do another coat covering less of the hot spots and less of the burnt red sections. I'll continue with this until I have nice transitions from the hot spots to the burnt red. If need be, you can always glaze in more of the fluorescent orange on the hot spots if you go too heavy with the red. Next, I'll be mixing burnt red and mahogany in a 50-50 mixture and thinning it down with some water. I'll be glazing in this midtone where the burnt red meets the mahogany. I'll apply multiple layers until I'm happy with the transition. As a given rule, the thinner your glaze, the smoother the transition, but the longer it takes to achieve. So find out where your happy medium is. For the models I'm airbrushing, I'm not using the reference pics for this step. Rather, I'm positioning the brush where I want the light to come from and spraying from there. I do spray a little bit all over the Mini, just so that all of the mostly visible parts of the armor have a little bit of burnt red on them. I use short bursts to help with control, though that's not super important at this phase. I did do 3 coats, making sure to build up a solid layer on the forward-facing face and shoulder portions of the model. Now I'm going to place my highest highlights. Again, I'm using warm flesh, thinned a little with airbrush thinner, and spraying at about 20 psi, same as with the burnt red. Placement is more important, though you don't have to be overly worried about precision, as you can tell with my airbrushing. If you want, you can use the reference picks for help with choosing where to place the highlights. Otherwise, I just typically aim for the face and shoulders on the front and the backpack from the back. I also hit parts of the legs that are sticking out more from the rest of the model. After putting in these highlights, I go over them with fluorescent orange for that really powerful pop. Finally, I spray ProAcryl Bold Pyrrole Red, thinned at least 50% with airbrush thinner at 20 psi. I'm spraying over the hot spots in most of the burnt red sections. I do multiple coats, but try to only hit the hot spots full on with one, so the orange can shine through and intensify the red. I try to avoid the shadows. I found it useful to aim the airbrush at the trim and use the overspray for the actual painting of the area. This is particularly useful for avoiding covering the hot spots too much. If need be, you can always go back with fluorescent orange if you cover them too much with the red. So we have our 2 results for the red armor. I honestly prefer the brush painted version, but full disclosure, he took me longer to paint than all the airbrushed guys combined. So for non-character models, I think I'm going to be sticking with the airbrush for this part. Now, these guys are looking pretty messy, but once we get that armor trim done, they're going to start really snapping together. So on that note, hit like, subscribe, and the notification button so you won't miss the next episode where I teach the secret of how to paint yellow trim without losing your mind.